Hi, and welcome to the Teacher Support Podcast. I'm so glad that you all are joining me for season three, the Teacher Support Podcast brought to you by New Teacher University. And I am your host and principal, Dr. Terry Ross. I'm so excited, teachers, that you've joined me. We changed it from the New Teacher Support Podcast to just Teacher Support Podcast because what we found out is that not only were teachers from all ranks of the profession listening to the podcast, that we also had administrators listening to the podcast because all of our guests are award winning teachers and administrators. So we only bring the very best to you on the Teacher Support Podcast. So I'm so glad that you joined us today. And today, I have one of my favorite topics that we're going to talk about, and it's literacy. And I have with me a guest, Miss Alicia Miller from Beyond Measure Education. She is the CEO and founder of Beyond Measure Education, where they focus on struggling readers. She focuses on supporting unique learners with a focus on literacy. And anyone that knows me know that literacy is almost like my love language because literacy is our currency to the world. It does not
Absolutely.
matter where you're from. It does not matter what your background is. If you can command the language, if you can understand the language, you can have currency. And so that's one of the reasons all the time that I was a teacher, a principal, and even at the district office level, one of my major focuses was on literacy. Let's make sure that our children can read, write, and speak. It's something that my mom focused on growing up. You had to use standard English in our home. You had to read the encyclopedia. If you didn't have anything else to read, get an encyclopedia and read it. So having a command of the language has been my currency for my entire life because not only can I speak the language, but I understand. That's what our children also need to do. They need to know how to understand. I've been watching so much going on in the world, and I always see things on the news, and I tell my wife, that's a reading comprehension issue right there. She said, what do you mean? I said, that was a total misunderstanding. If they had understood each other, or if the tone had been different, that
Mhm.
never would have happened. If someone had known how to de-escalate and had the language to de-escalate, that could have been avoided, whether it's a domestic issue or if it's strangers. Oftentimes, it's tone, it's literacy, and it's how we respond. So I'm so glad to have Miss Alicia Miller with us today from Beyond Measure Education because we're going to talk about struggling readers, and she's going to share with us some strategies for struggling readers that they can do before, during, and after their reading. And it's a strategy that she has adapted over the years. But before we get into that, I want Ms. Miller to introduce herself, tell us who she is, and why did she start Beyond Measure.
Yes, thank you, Terry, for having me. I really appreciate it. My name is Alicia Miller. I am the founder CEO of Beyond Measure Education. We're based out of Florida, South Florida to be exact. The purpose of Beyond Measure is to ensure that our students are reading and actually enjoy reading. So I have an extensive love for reading. I see that you do as well. And
Absolutely.
my mission for sure is to ensure that all of our children are able to read. And like you said, I love how you explain it that literacy is currency. And it absolutely makes sense. I'm going to start using that.
Yes,
But
yes.
yeah, it makes sense. It really does. So what I do, I like to incorporate different reading strategies. I try to incorporate representation to make it culturally relevant. A lot of times, students stray from reading because it's not something that they can relate to. So I try to include, culturally relevant text so that the kids are seeing themselves, their family, their household, that kind of thing. But we do focus on literacy and, in particular, struggling readers and students with unique abilities. I say unique abilities, those students who have, as we say, disabilities, but I call it unique abilities.
Absolutely. Because it is not a disability with DIS, is disability.
Right,
And my background is special
right.
education. That's what I taught at the high school level. I did my student teaching at the elementary level in special education. And that's where my love for literacy began. I had a student teacher named Ms. Lorna Thomas, and her classroom was filled with print, books, and a whole lot of love, and she had a lot of expectations for her children. And I didn't know at the time that I was becoming a literacy expert, and I did not know at the time that I would be teaching, that I would have anything to do with an elementary school. Although I taught at the high school level, I began my second principal job was at an elementary school. And I was able to go to the University of Memphis. They had something called the Memphis Literacy Academy, Memphis Literacy Fellows, and it was run by Dr. Bob Cooter and Dr. Perkins. And
Mm.
they did such an excellent job at the University of Memphis in teaching leaders how to be literacy specialists and knowing so that we would know what to do when we walked into the classrooms. And it was just magical for me. So, Dr. Perkins and Dr. Cooter, thank you all so much, because what you taught me, I have used it at every level of my career, in high schools, middle schools, at the district level. So, without me talking anymore, Ms. Miller, tell us what strategy that you're going to share with us today.
Right. So with reading, we focus on three particular areas, and that's before reading, during reading, and after reading. The strategy that I develop, I make sure that it's encompassing those three things. And it's very simple. You can easily implement it in any grade level, basically any subject that uses reading, which is most subjects, right?
Yes.
Any text, you can use it with any text. And I just started using it probably about 15 years ago, and it just kind of evolved from there.
Yes.
And I use it every year, and it works very well. So I'm ready to break it down for you guys whenever you're ready, Dr. Terry. I'm
Oh,
ready.
we're ready. We are ready. So you are an expert at this. If you've been using it for 15 years, yes, you have perfected this, and we are ready for it. So what's the name of the strategy, first of all?
So I like to call it a page. I explain it to my children as a page when I explain it to my students, but it's based on reciprocal teaching.
Yes.
Um, and so, as I stated before, we're doing the before reading strategies, during reading strategies, and after reading strategies. So when it comes to before reading, you want to make sure that you're including activities that allow the students to preview the text. So it could be anything from like an anticipation guide to an oral discussion or written discussion, puzzles, anything like that. Anything that's going to get the child's mind ready for the
Yes.
topic and for what they're about to read, right? So what I like to use is a writing prompt. That's what I like to use. You can use anything. Like I said, sometimes anticipation guides works well too. But I like
Well,
to use a writing prompt.
I love that because right at the beginning, you've incorporated writing.
Right.
And research shows that Mike Smoker did some research where they visited 1,500 classrooms, and they just randomly visited them. And out of those 1,500 classrooms, they almost saw no writing taking place on a
Mhm.
daily basis in the reading instruction or in the language arts class. So this is so awesome that you're starting now with writing. Thank you. Carry on. I just wanted to
Yeah,
give you your flowers for that.
yeah, absolutely. I found that when it comes to reading, and by the way, I have a master's in reading. I didn't give out my credentials, but I have a bachelor's in ESC, I have a master's in reading, and a master's in educational leadership. And I've been in
Okay.
education since 2008.
Okay, for
Um,
receipts, give us those
right.
receipts. Yes.
But like you said, with writing, when it comes to reading, we need to encompass reading, writing, speaking, and now
Yes.
technology, right? So
Absolutely.
reading and writing goes hand in hand. It has to be there. They're sister and brother, basically. So I like to start off with the writing component. Um, I'm not sure what you guys call it in Memphis or in other states, but we call it a do now, right? A
Yes.
bell ringer, a do now, right? So I start off with the do now, okay? Start with the do now, and it's usually an open-ended question. The question is related to the book or whatever we're reading, whatever text that we're reading. It could be a poem, it could be nonfiction, it could be an article, literature, it doesn't matter. but the open-ended question, which is the do now, has to be related to the text in some way. Okay. It can be related to the topic, the theme of the unit, whatever it is, but it's going to get the students thinking about the topic and what's to come. Right. So just make sure it's an open-ended question so that it gives the child um, ample amount of time to be able to write something and write something that you can go back and actually grade and dissect and see where their writing is. That's the purpose of having them write so that you can be able to see how their writing is, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So we start with the writing piece.
Okay.
Okay.
And can you give me an example of what that prompt might be for a piece of text?
Yeah. So let's say we're reading I did an article with my kids last year about Starbucks. Starbucks was sued for hot coffee, right? Um, and the prompt, right? So the prompt that I gave, which is my do now, as part of my page, the prompt was, do you believe lawsuits have gotten out of hand in this country, or do you feel that lawsuits are, a way to keep companies accountable? And
Mhm.
so you say whatever your response is, explain or elaborate, right? So that way you give, they're gonna, because they're just gonna say yes or no, you
Yes,
know.
yes, yes, yes.
So I told them you have to set the standard from the beginning when you're first introducing this at the beginning of the year. Tell them, listen, you're gonna have to restate the question, right? And I need complete sentences. You want, the punctuation and the semantics, you want all of that correctly written. So you have to establish that at the beginning of the year when you're first introducing this so that they know I can't just give Ms. Miller a yes or no question. If I'm going to say yes, I need to elaborate on it, right? And they have to
Yes.
provide. So
Beautiful.
absolutely, you have to state that because, like you said before, expectations is important, is key. They don't know what to do unless you tell them this is what I'm expecting from you. Once you said that, they will do it. They will deliver.
Yes, and I'm so glad that you shared that because so often in education we have expectations that we don't teach, and especially around behavior and things like that. So thank you so much for sharing that. So what's the next step after that, after the before reading?
Right. So you have the do now is the before reading component, and then we have our doing reading. And so the second step would be vocabulary.
Oh, okay.
What I have the kids do is to select their own vocabulary words. So I have the kids select 3 to 5 words, depending on how long the piece is, right? So anywhere between 3 to 5 words. I tell them to start with words that are unfamiliar. So words that they're not familiar with, that they don't know the definition of. And you're gonna always have that super smart Einstein. I know every word. so so I say, okay, we're gonna either find words that are familiar, words or phrases that are unfamiliar, words or phrases that are important to the text, or words and phrases that you find interesting, right?
Mhm.
Because depending on what we're reading, it could be Shakespeare, and some of the words and phrases that they use may not will be completely different from what the language
Absolutely.
they're using now, right?
Yes.
Sometimes we read things that have slang that they're not familiar with. So that's why I say things that may be interesting. It may not necessarily be words that they don't know, because as I
Hmm.
stated, kids will tell you anything to get out of doing the assignment. So they'll say, I know every word there. And you
Yes.
have to have an alternative for them. So I tell them words that are interesting, important, or unfamiliar, but to
Hmm.
start with the unfamiliar words first. So once they find those 3 words, they have to use context clues to define them. They can't use the dictionary. They can't use what I like to say Google Daddy, which is Google. Okay. So they can't use Google or the internet. They have to use their brain. And again, if you tell them this from the beginning, you set the tone from the beginning, they will know automatically. I have to use the words that's surrounding this text, that's surrounding this word in order to um, find the meaning. And let me just say that sometimes they're not going to have the correct meaning. you know,
Yes.
they're going to choose words and they're going to try to define the word using context clues, and the definition they come up with may not be correct. and that's
Yes.
fine. It's not our job um, to mark it wrong. You don't want to mark it wrong. That's not what we're doing. You just want them to focus on using their brain
Hmm.
to figure out words they don't know, because our kids have a bad habit of, I don't know the word, they're going to skip it, they're going to move over it. They're not going to
Yes.
stop and take the time to try to figure out what the word is. So once you come back to that, and this is something completely different, but I'm just going to say it now. What you can do is, if when you're going through the notebook and you're grading that piece, you can go back and read it and have them, okay, I see that you have this definition. I want you to go ahead and use the text, use your resources to get the actual definition out. You know what I mean? You can even take those words from what the kids chose and choose it as the vocabulary word of the week, and go back around and give it to the whole class. You know what I mean? So there's ways that you can use it to expand later on. That makes
And
sense.
the beauty of that is think about the ownership if one of the words that I chose is part of the vocabulary for the week. And
Right.
I'm thinking about all of the skills that they have to use because sometimes the context clues are not that easy.
Oh no,
You may
that's
have to
true.
read two or three sentences, and in
Mm-hmm.
a perfect sense is right before or after the word. But sometimes you may have to go back and read two sentences above and two sentences
Mm-hmm.
below. You may have to use some inferences. So
Right.
it's a lot of different skills that can go into that, and that is so robust. So thank you so much for that piece. And vocabulary is definitely my specialty because once kids get older, you may not spend a lot of time with strategies like phonemic awareness and the decoding and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
However, but if you're just teaching whole scale vocabulary, that's worth its weight in gold.
Right. Absolutely. And you're right. There are like you said, it's not going to always be black and white right there. They will have to use that brain. They're going to have to use
Yes.
it.
You can
And
tell
that's
I
what
love
you want
literacy,
them to do.
can't you?
Oh yes, I definitely can tell.
Yes,
For
I
sure.
love literacy.
Yes. But that's what we want them to do. We want them to engage in what they're reading. We want them to
Absolutely.
engage. So that's part of having that vocabulary, context clues. And like you said, they're taking ownership. It's accountability. So
Yes,
now they're taking ownership of their own learning, right? So
absolutely.
they're held accountable for it, which is, especially when it comes to secondary, we definitely need to make them accountable for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I tell my students all the time, that's the difference between you signing a contract with 200% interest on a set of rims or 675% interest on a set of rims that you
Right.
paid $3,000 for. Now you are in, it's on your credit because you can't, the car's gone and you still hadn't paid the rims off.
Right.
So
Yeah.
vocabulary is one part of the doing. What else do you have during reading that they do?
So the doing reading, well, with this particular strategy, I try to keep it, I have 4 steps, right? Um, so we had the before reading, which is the writing component.
Mhm.
We have the during reading, which is the vocabulary piece. And then the third and fourth step, I'll go to the third step, but both of those are more of after reading activities.
Okay. Okay.
So the third step is to summarize the text.
Yes.
And I love summarizing.
Yes.
I love, if a kid can summarize it effectively, then they know it.
Yes.
So the third step is to summarize the text. So they've read it, they've previewed it, they engaged in reading, and now it's time for them to summarize what they read. Again, depending on how long the piece is, you can limit the number of sentences. Uh,
Yes.
I teach one sentence summaries at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
So I have my kids. Um, I tell them no more than 3 sentences, but um, I shoot for one sentence summaries.
Okay.
Okay, because I teach them that, and a lot of times, if you give them room, they'll write 2 pages and say it's a summary.
That's
So
not a bad problem. But I understand what you're saying. You're making them really be concise with it. Yes.
yes, yes, because everything does not go in the summary. You know,
Absolutely.
we just need the gist of it, right? We just need the important components. We don't need all of the details.
Mhm.
So I tell them to keep it short and sweet, no more than 3 to 4 sentences when it comes to the summary. Um,
Beautiful.
and then step 4 is visualization.
Hmm.
So the last step is for the students to draw a visual, something that represents what they read visually. Now, the thing is, when it comes to great readers, um, great readers visualize what they read. They
Hmm.
absolutely visualize what they read. And I tell my students all the time, I'm not grading you on your artistic ability. I just want to know that as you read, you were able to picture this in your mind.
Mm.
And so I need them to give me something. And I'm not an artiste at all.
Yes.
So when I teach them this, I go on the board and I'm drawing stick figures and I tell them double the sticks. Just double the sticks. I mean? Double the sticks, give them some clothes, some little
Yes.
triangles and squares or whatnot, and we're good. So it's not necessarily about the drawing. It's just knowing that they were able to see this image as they were reading, um, and it stuck out to them, that particular piece. So it may not be a full blown masterpiece. It could be something very simple. If we're talking about going back to the Starbucks coffee, they
Yes.
may just draw, a cup of coffee, right?
Absolutely.
But then I'll have somebody else, they'll come with they got the coffee, they got the dog, they show the coffee falling on the dog, they show the courtroom. I mean, they have this whole, and that's great too. But, it's just the idea that they're visualizing what they read, they can see it. And that is one visualization is a reading strategy that needs to be taught. And like I said, great readers visualize what they read. So that's one of the reasons why that is
Well, thank you so much. That is beautiful because we need our children to be able to visualize. If you're just reading and you can't see what you're reading, like I have a movie in my head when I'm reading.
there. Exactly.
I,
Exactly.
I feel like I'm there, and I don't know who taught me that, but to be able to visualize is beautiful, and it also helps for them in their regular life because when they think about what they want to be, can you visualize you being an attorney?
Mm,
Can you visualize
absolutely.
yourself being a doctor, a lawyer? Can you visualize yourself being a teacher, being on that
Mhm.
beach? We met each other through Dr. EJT, and she told us to visualize ourselves 5 years from now running down the beach. And,
Right.
and and what did we see? Well, the first thing I said, I saw a six pack in front of
Right.
me. So I've been working on that six pack. I've pulled my
Yes.
Tae back out. I've been
Right.
looking at some other exercises that I've been doing. So and I saw myself wealthy, of course, and happy and peaceful and
Mhm.
connected. I saw all of those things, but the first visual was me in being in shape and healthy. So thank you for teaching our children how to visualize because they need to learn how to dream and dream in color.
Absolutely. And that like you said, the visualizing, just having that image in your head of this is my end goal, right?
Yes.
And now what are the steps? Like you said, you're breaking out the table, you're looking at other things that you can do to hit that six pack that you want. So being able to see yourself and then now what do I need to do to get there?
Yes.
So yeah, that's absolutely 100% needed for sure. I mean, we do vision boards every year. Come on now, and we're adults.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I love that you call this strategy the page because they can do their do now at the top. The middle is the vocabulary, and the vocabulary, and I've said for years that's the chunk of the content
Hmm.
because if you don't own the vocabulary, you can't even grasp the content.
Right.
And then at the
Right.
end, they're doing what are they doing after the vocabulary?
They're summarizing
They're
and then they're drawing the
summarizing
picture.
and then they're drawing a picture. That's beautiful. That's like 4 steps. That's almost like a Freya model, just in a different way. And it's
Hmm.
a more advanced level of a Freya model for before doing and after reading. This is such a wonderful strategy. I hope that you are really sharing this with a lot of people. Uh, and if you can, I can figure out how to share a PDF of your one pager for this as well, if you'd like
Oh,
to share it
I'll
with the
definitely,
audience.
I can, yeah, for sure. I have many of them, trust me,
Oh, well, you can take a pic.
because I
You can.
do, no,
I
I
was
was
gonna
going to
say
say
put it
I
on
do
a
them every year.
PowerPoint slide, and I
Okay.
drop it. I drop examples of it as we're teaching, as you're doing the as I'm editing the podcast. I can
Hmm.
drop examples of it in the podcast.
No problem. I can definitely do that. I can definitely do that. And this is something that I'm telling you, I use it every single year. It just came about because I don't know if you guys do this in your district, but in my district, we have to come up with an emergency lesson plans. They have to cover a week,
Hmm.
just in case life happened and you're out
Yes,
for an extended amount of time. But in my mind, when it first came up, I'm saying to myself, well, I don't know where I'm going to be. I don't know what I'm going to be teaching at that time. I don't know, God forbid, if it does happen, what's going on. And so I needed to find something that was going to keep the kids engaged, that they're still learning, and that they know wasn't fluff. Because a lot of times when we're out and we leave sub work, students think it's fluff and that they're not, oh, they just fluff work. They don't want us to really do this. But this strategy, I teach it at the beginning of the year. So they know when they see it, this is the real deal. This is not fluff work. This is something that you're going to have to do. And when Ms. Miller come back, it will be great. And they
absolutely.
know that it's something that they need because I've taught it over and over again.
And they
Um,
know the process. And I love that this is a content area reading strategy, a
right.
area literacy strategy that you can use in math, you can use it
Mm-hmm.
in science, social studies, and ELA, and you can give them a
Right.
piece of high level content that they can do this with. And because it's a process, you've taught the process, and the students know that if you're out, that is something that you know they can do. They can't say, well, the sub didn't know what they were
Mm-hmm.
talking about. No,
Exactly.
you already know
Exactly.
this, and I expect this from you. And they
Right.
can get it done, and they can get it done relatively quickly. And I would,
Mm-hmm.
and something another beautiful part about this is that it can be done in a group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for
You
sure.
can
You could
use it
break
in a
it. You could
group.
break it up. I've done that before. I break it up into groups. I have them do it as a poster. Um, for instance, we'll read a piece of text, right?
Hmm.
And there's questions. A lot of times the district has the questions that the selection test that goes with it, and
Yes,
I'll have them break up in groups and do it as a poster and put it across the wall. So they have like a graffiti walk or a wall walk, and I give them the quiz, and they
yes,
have those posters up as references to use to help them answer those questions for the quiz. So it can be used in so many different ways. It can be used in many different ways. Because one thing that I found too, our students are very resourceful when it comes to finding the answers for questions. so,
absolutely,
so when you
absolutely.
have those district questions or those selection tests, they will Google the answer in a heartbeat. But when it comes to this, the way it's set up, this is not something that can be Googled. It really can't.
Yes,
They have to actually sit down, read it. They have to answer the question. It's an open-ended question. They have to answer it, right? They have to look and find those vocabulary words and figure out the context. And it's not something that can easily be, go on and Google and it's not like ABCD. So on
absolutely.
top of answering the questions, I give them this as well. I give them this and I give them whatever the district wants them to answer in terms of the selection test. Yeah.
Yes, well, thank you so much, and thank you for joining us today. Would you like to recap the four steps in just a quick, succinct way?
Sure, sure. So the first step is the do now. It's an open-ended question that is related to the text in some way. Step two is the vocabulary. Have them choose 3 to 5 words, their choice, either unfamiliar, interesting, or important to the text, and have them define them using context clues. Step three is to summarize the text. So they're going to summarize what they read, 3 to 5 sentences. And then the last step is visualization, where students will draw a picture to represent what they read.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Miller. This has been beautiful. Ms. Alicia Miller, CEO and founder of Beyond Measure Education, where they focus on struggling readers and unique learners. So thank you. And would you give us a message to encourage teachers in starting the new year?
Oh wow. So I would say to for sure, come in strong, especially if you're a new teacher, or any teacher. You have a new set of kids. I would definitely come in strong with your procedures, your routines right away. Stick with them. Teach those routines and procedures consistently over the next couple of weeks to make sure that they have it. I would definitely include this one pager in there. Trust me, you're gonna need it. I would definitely include that as part of the routine. Stick with it, and you do everything up front. It's gonna pay off in the long run on the back end for sure. Yeah.
You are definitely a master teacher because when you said come in strong, I was sitting waiting for what you said. You said routines and procedures. And that is so important because that's the relationship building process. What are
Oh
my
yeah.
expectations? And then can you follow them? And you said for the first couple of weeks, practice those routines and procedures.
Hmm.
Now, that's worth its weight in gold right there, Ms. Miller. So
Oh
thank you so
yes.
much for joining us on the Teacher Support Podcast brought to you by New Teacher University. I'm your host and principal, Dr. Terry Ross. And teachers, please know that there's some student that's coming to school every day because of you. Yes, they're coming for themselves, but they're coming every day because of you. And until they figure that out, that they're coming for themselves, continue to stand in the gap. And the way that you can stand in the gap is by focusing on your wellness and your self-care and filling your toolbox with these type of strategies that Ms. Miller just shared with us. Again, thank you, Ms. Alicia Miller, CEO and founder of Beyond Measure Education, and where they focus on struggling readers and unique learners. Thank you for joining
Thank you
us.
so much for having me, Dr. Ross. I
A-
appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. This has been great. I appreciate it. And you can come back anytime.
Thank you. Have a blessed
Absolutely.
year.
Yes, you too.